A recall alert tonight before you sit down to dinner. Millions of pounds of grab-and-go food items are recalled because of potential listeria and salmonella contamination. The items include entrees, burritos, wraps, and pizzas at several big-name stores like Harris Teeter and Whole Foods. And one of the manufacturers affected has a plant right here in the Queen City. NBC Charlotte's Rob Hughes has the latest.
At this point, there's been no confirmed reports of anyone sick as a result of eating these recalled foods, but the USDA, of course, not taking any chances. The source of this potential contamination is McCain Foods, which distributed ingredients to about 12 other food manufacturers, including Bakkavor Foods right here in Charlotte. Now, those manufacturers notified the USDA about products they shipped that could include ingredients possibly tainted with bacteria, all provided by that single company, McCain Foods. The stores potentially affected include Harris Teeter, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Walmart, Kroger, and 7-Eleven. The initial recall involved a few hundred pounds of salads, but the latest recall includes nearly 800,000 pounds of ready-to-eat meat and poultry products. Again, as of now, there have been no confirmed reports of anyone sick as a result of these potentially contaminated foods. And for a full list of the affected stores and the affected food products, you can visit our website, WCNC.com. In Charlotte, Rob Hughes, NBC Charlotte.